more about Ash go that Floyd. I thought I was going to start off with a half set there to get us all going. I'm sure we might have to do that later on. No, to eat about Ash. Just Marobus, I suppose, just as an aside, we were in the Shannon today, and there was a very special occasion today that they took a photograph of everybody in the Shannon, because today is the 90th birthday of Shannon Éireann, and they just wanted a photograph of all the cronies in there to get to have it for posterity. So it's interesting that you have an anniversary here at the church and an anniversary at the Shannon. But again, you know, it brings up the whole idea of well, is it worthwhile having a Shannon or not? We would contend it is, but that it needs a serious rethink about how it's working, etc. However, there are three of us Sinn Féin senators in the Shannon. We might be a small group, but we're certainly trying to make our mark and make ourselves heard and felt in there, and use it to put forward the Sinn Féin policy and to challenge government policy any way we can, and to use it as a platform to be able to raise issues for people in any area around the country that we can, and to take part in all of the debates. So I suppose I'm I love coming to Clare anytime I get an invite. It's one of my favourite counties, apart from Galway. And but you know, obviously, what we're here to discuss is the implications of the budget. And we did a similar meeting last night in Galway. And what I said at the meeting in Galway is the same as what I've been saying here tonight as well. We're not here just to have a go at the government and have a go at government policies, etc. And what Sinn Féin have been trying to do very constructively over the last couple of years is have a very positive input into the budgetary process. So it's not just about saying, you know, what the government is doing is wrong, they shouldn't be cutting this and they shouldn't be cutting that. It's about putting forward a type of politics which puts forward a different way of handling the crisis that we're in at the moment. I suppose our budgetary proposals come as part of a broader package. We launched about 6 weeks ago our Jobs Initiative, which covered a number of different measures, and I'll maybe mention those in a minute or two. But there's a three-pronged approach to our economic policy at the moment. One is the Jobs Initiative, which is about creating employment again and retaining the employment that's there, and doing that on a regional basis as well. The other part of it then was our pre-budget submission, which we put forward about 5 weeks before the budget, to give the government the options that we thought would be fairer and better. And the third prong will be a document which is being finalised at the moment on how to deal with the banking crisis and the financial crisis that we find ourselves in. So that'll be coming out over the next number of weeks. So I suppose one of the things that was very interesting that came into my inbox yesterday, and I've heard this mentioned on a number of occasions. There's the CRO do a chart every so often. It's called the Survey on Income and Living Conditions. And even during the recession, the 10% of wealthy people, the 10% of the most wealthy people in this country have become a lot more wealthy. And the other 90%, their disposable income and their wealth has decreased. So, to start from that tenet, I suppose that really kind of signifies what Sinn Féin policy around dealing with the budget would have been, is that there are an awful lot of wealthy people in Ireland. There are people who have made money during the crisis, off the backs, in a lot of cases, of people who were suffering because of the financial crisis. So the main thrust of what we were saying about the budget was, well, why don't you follow the wealth? Go after the people who have the money, and don't go after the people who don't have the money. And it's not just because it's our philosophy, it's actually because it makes economic sense as well. Because you know, from all the small towns in the east and west, Clare, for example, and I'm sure Ennis has felt it as well, but maybe not to the same extent, the shops, pubs, restaurants are closing hand over fist. I know, for example, in Clifton, which is on northwest Connemara, if you walk around the town of Clifton, almost every second shop is closed at the moment. There were over 50 closures during the year of retail outlets. And part of the reason there is because people's disposable income has decreased. People just don't have the money in their pockets. And what's happened over the 6 budgets we've had, the austerity budgets as we would call them, is that the disposable income of most Irish citizens in middle and lower classes has decreased. So they don't have the money to spend. And that has had the knock-on effect then of they're not spending money in shops, the shops have less income, they have to let people go, there's less people working, there's more people on the dole, etc. And you all know that cycle has proven itself over and over again. And what these austerity budgets have done is that they haven't we tackled the basic crisis we've had of job creation. We had a jobs initiative from this government about a year ago now almost at this stage, where they said they're going to create 200,000 jobs. Now, on a net basis, we're actually at a standstill. We've lost a few more jobs than we've actually gained in the last year or so. But that's without taking into consideration that 85,000 people have emigrated. So, I mean, in real terms, if those people had stayed, we'd be in the deficit of up to about 85,000, 90,000 people unemployed. We still have 470,000 people unemployed, which is about 15%. So it's obvious that the economic policies that were followed by Fianna Fáil and the Green Party, and now by Fine Gael and Labour, are not creating jobs. They're actually creating more unemployment. And we would contend that because of the way the economic crisis is being approached, it's going to create more of it. And you're going to have more immigration and less people actually in the working arena. So that's why we would have put forward our different jobs creation plan. And just to indicate roughly some of the areas we were looking at in that, because that was the first part of our policy document. We were going to take money from the National Pension Reserve Fund. We were going to get money from the European Investment Bank, and then money from other sources through savings, etc. But our jobs plan was around investing in capital infrastructure projects, investing in broadband, investing, say, in something like the sugar beet industry, regenerating the docklands, regeneration projects for Dublin and Limerick, building 100 new schools, 50 new primary care centres, etc. And we were also going to set up a job retention fund of around 100 million to protect 50,000 jobs a year, because not only do we have jobs that have been lost, but we also have businesses, and a lot of them say will be small and medium enterprises, where they're really teetering on the brink. And in a lot of cases, especially if it's an owner-occupier who's running their own business, they're basically using any savings they have to keep the business going, because they're trying to keep the people they have employed with them, be they family members or local people. The last thing they want to do is close the business, basically. So they will try and keep it going whatever it costs. So we were going to put a jobs retention fund in to try and protect 15,000 jobs a year. We were going to open up state procurement. This is where the state is actually buying or giving contracts out to different companies, to break those contracts up into smaller contracts so that it would be easier for local companies and Irish Indigenous companies to pitch for those contracts. We were also looking at things like the upward-only rents. One of the biggest issues for most businesses is the rent they have to pay in their premises. They're still paying the rents they paid in boom times, even though the income is nothing like what they had in the boom times. And this government has totally failed to address that. And capping of utility costs, etc. So there's quite a number of different things in our jobs initiative plan, which is still available on the Sinn Féin website if anybody wants to have a look at it. So the logic of that is that you're using the money that we do have available to us. All of the initiatives there were costed, the money was available from the different sources, and we could have got people working. That would automatically decrease the number of people on the live register. You have less people on the dole, so therefore that's going to decrease your social welfare. It's going to make the number of cuts that you have to make in the whole social welfare area less, so you don't have to do the types of cut that have been done in this budget. So coming then to the budgetary measures, it's often been thrown at us, but I think actually some of the commentary or the newspapers and the media have started softening their cough on this one a little bit. But Sinn Féin would often have been accused of fairy tale economics, that they're not based on real figures. We're not living in the real world. Well, I think what we've had is if our economics is fairy tale, then certainly this government's and the previous government's economics were certainly nightmare. But what we did for this budgetary measure was that even though we disagree fundamentally with the way that the economic crisis is being dealt with in the European scenario, that we do feel that there should be a better deal available from Europe, that we do need to deal with bondholders, that we do need to get a write-down, etc. Even taking that into consideration, let's go with what the government is saying, that we do need to make an adjustment of 3.5 million euros this year. Because if we do, we're going to be comparing like with like. So that would be the logic behind saying, yes, let's make a 3.5 million adjustment. Let's show, though, that there are different ways of doing it to the ones that the government has done. So our logic was to say, to take that, to use some of it as proposed new expenditure. So we were proposing 338 million of expenditure in different projects, and I'll talk about those. We were looking at bringing money in from new taxes, and we were also looking at savings across the public sector, etc. So basically what we were looking at doing was investment. And again, it was investment that would support low and lower and middle income families, the people we feel are very, very squeezed. Those who have maybe huge mortgages, have young families, are trying to pay their bills, etc. And people on lower incomes as well, people with disability, older people, etc. People in rural areas, and those who don't find it easy to find other sources of income or work. So a number of the different things that we were proposing. Number one was free school books for every child in the state. Now, it might seem like a strange thing to be proposing, but if you think about it, most of those families, one of the biggest expenses they have in September is putting the kids back to school. If you could provide free school books for every child in the state, it's just automatically going to take a load off those families, and it's a very practical thing to do. We also wanted to double the budget for school meals and to expand that programme. That was only going to cost 35 million. But again, we know from people that we're talking to that there are children going to school hungry. And that's totally wrong in this day and age. But it's also a very small expense, but it's a very regular expense that every family has, is providing school meals for the kids going to school. So we wanted to bring that in as well. We were also looking at increasing the earnings disregard by €16.50 to €146.50 for the one parent payment. That was to counteract a cutback last year to lone parents. Because what we're also seeing as well with this budget is kind of the cumulative effect of a number of budgets on top of each other. And last year in particular, lone parents were hammered with a number of different cutbacks. So this was to try and counteract that. We've had a lot of presentations as well, I suppose, from different groups. In Leinster House, we've had an awful lot of groups who come up and present their case to you. But I think one of the saddest ones I heard this year, we've had a lot from carers, people with disability, and they break your heart, to be honest, to listen to them. But one story we did have from a lone parent who came in a number of weeks before the budget was that she dreads Wednesdays. And she said she dreads Wednesdays because that's the day before she gets her payment. And she said that's the day she normally goes hungry. She'd feed her kids, but she would normally maybe have a slice or two of toast to keep her going on Wednesday. She just literally doesn't have enough money to keep her going. And I think it's an absolute disgrace that we're living in a state where where that can happen. And that we have a budget that's actually going to compound that. And that's what's been brought in. We were also looking at reversing the cuts to home help hours. So we were reinstating 950,000 home help hours at a cost of 60.9 million. We also want to restore the training materials allowance for CE participants. That was where there was cutbacks to the CE projects locally, so that basically there was no capital available to do the project. So you had people on schemes with no money to actually really do anything on those schemes. We were also looking to reduce the fee for non-GP referrals. We wanted to hire 3,500 frontline staff in the public service. Now what we're looking at is nurses, guards, teachers, special needs assistants, all those types of areas. Because what we've also seen is that we've seen thousands of people leaving the public service, but in most cases it's people who've left the wrong places, and it's not the people we needed to lose. So the fact that that whole clear out of the public service happened, I think it was 27,000 people left, most of them left in the wrong places. For example, in Galway, in the HSE, 50% of the people who left the HSE West in Galway were nurses, frontline nurses. We didn't see half enough people leaving from management. And so we now have a whole cohort of managers and people in administrative areas and not enough nurses. And I heard an announcement on the radio coming down in the car that there's going to be 1,000 new nurses hired now to cover for the agency nurses that were being used. And we know that lots of agency nurses have been used in all the hospitals to cover for the nurses that we lost in the public service. So we wanted to replace 3,500 frontline staff. We were also then looking at the other side. So that was the investment end of things. We felt that was wise investment. It was good investment. It was going to help those families that were most at risk and were being hit most by the cutbacks on previous budgets. So coming in then on the other side from taxes after adjustments, we were looking at, again, following the money, following the wealth. So and this isn't a new policy. We've said for a number of years that we bring in a number of different new taxes. Number one would be a wealth tax on people who had a net wealth of over €1 million, with working farms and business assets and part of the family home and pensions excluded. So basically, if people had a lot of money, if they had a lot of investments, you take the wealth tax from them at 1% for any assets over $1 million. And then the other one we were looking at was a 48% rate of tax for anybody earning over 100 grand. We felt that if anybody was on 100 grand, they were doing reasonably well, and they would be able to cope through a recession. But then it was only fair that you could bring in a third rate of tax of 48% on earnings above that 100 grand. That was one of the other ones. We also suggested increasing capital gains tax and capital acquisitions tax, which the government have done in this budget, but from our perspective they haven't gone far enough. We also wanted to standardise discretionary tax relief and get rid of a lot of tax loopholes that were out there that people were able to invest in if you had a lot of money. So, you know, we were able to bring in, we were calculating that we bring in 2.758 billion on taxes. You've probably heard a lot of the media talking about, well, have Sinn Féin fully costed this? And I know Michael Noonan came out with a statement saying that Fianna Fáil and Sinn Féin had not availed of the opportunity of asking the Department of Finance to cost all of their pre-budgetary measures. That's a load of rubbish, because every single measure that we have was actually, the figures we got for them were through parliamentary questions. So Pierce Doherty and the guys working with him would have sent in a parliamentary question on every single one of these measures and asked them to cost it, and have got all of the information back. So every figure we have, apart from one, was based on those figures. So to say, you know, I mean, Noonan is really trying to create a red herring there when he's saying it wasn't costed. Everything there was fully costed. The only one the Department of Finance refused to cost on an ongoing basis is a wealth tax. They won't put a figure on it. And we reckon it's because they know it would actually probably bring in more than we estimate. So our estimates are based on the CSO figures, they're based on European studies that have been done, and studies by different economists. And it's also done by looking at wealth taxes in other countries, how their models work and how much they bring in. So we're fairly confident that our figures stack up, and if the Department of Finance actually did cost the wealth tax, it might bring in more than we would even be saying at the moment. So there was another number of adjustments we were looking at. We were looking at an adjustment to allow for the capping of public salaries. That, you know, public servants shouldn't be getting more than 100 grand a year, that there would be a capping of that as a temporary measure. That we would reduce the excise on petrol and diesel by 5%. And we take all of those earning the minimum wage out of the USC, exempting an additional 296,000 earners. That would cost 131 million, but we reckon that that's money that's going to go straight back into the economy, because you're putting the money back into the pockets of people who are spending every penny they have. And they're not spending it abroad, they're spending it locally. So again, that would kickstart the local economies and help the local shops, help the local bars, the local restaurants, and keep the local economy afloat. So we reckon that money would almost go straight back in by virtue of giving it back to the people who had the lowest income anyway. And we also then highlighted quite a lot of savings we felt that could be done. We were looking at a social welfare amnesty, which we reckon would bring in 55 million. We also, Pierce did a very interesting parliamentary question at one stage to the revenue commissioners about the black market. And he found that from an expenditure of about $1 million, I think if you hired 12 more auditors in the Department of Finance, you could actually, they calculated themselves that you could recoup 100 million from black market activities in relation to tax. Now, you might say, oh, that's all the kind of the lower end of the scale people, you know, who aren't paying any tax whatsoever. But the interesting thing was that it wasn't those at all. It was actually more the professional people like solicitors, doctors, auctioneers, accountants, etc., who were doing a little bit on the books and a little bit under the table. And that was what the revenue were basically telling us, that was where there was a huge amount of black market activity going on, so that you could potentially bring in 100 million from focusing on that type of activity. We were looking at capping salaries at 100,000, as I said, capping VC chief salaries, capping city and county manager pay at 100,000, the non-commercial state agency CEOs at 100 grand, withdrawing secretary general allowances, etc., consultants pay at 150,000, and reducing all state agency board fees by 25%, which would bring in all of those salary adjustments. We reckon can bring in about 204 million. We also wanted to look at the pay and Oireachtas allowances. There's been a number of things which were kind of just optics really in the budget, which focused on, I know that some of the Labour people have been coming out with the figure of that there was taxes on the wealthy of 500 million. When they were challenged on that, the figure actually is 163 million. We totted up and got independent people to verify the different measures in the budget, what they were being said about what wealthy people, which could potentially be called tax on wealthy people, and the maximum you could find was 163 million. So the idea that you might be being told that, well, we have taxed the wealthy in this budget is a load of codswallop. The fact of the matter is they haven't. But there was, in the area of pay and Oireachtas allowances, they could have gone a lot further. Basically what they did was they scrapped the leader's allowance for the independent TDs. Big swing in Mickey, as it's up and go. That's not going to save an awful lot. And it's only really the only people that benefits is people who aren't independent TDs, because it means that they don't have that money available to do whatever they were doing with it. We'd agreed with scrapping of it, but we also wanted to see that the chief whip's allowances were scrapped. That if you're a government TD and you're a chair of a committee, that allowance is scrapped. Sure, you're there anyway, you're getting paid to do the job. Why would you get extra to be paid to be the chair of a committee? And the whip's allowances and stuff like that. To cap the ministers and special advisors' pay. We were told that no special advisor would be paid more than €80,000, but almost every department now at this stage has at least one that's getting paid over that. And I think there are two in the Department of Health that are getting paid up to 160 grand each. And we were told, we're not going to be paying any more special advisors. So there were savings there, and it hasn't gone far enough. So they're kind of the broad outline of where we were coming from and what we put forward, and that was all presented to the government. We all presented them to different government TDs and to the ministers, and that's why we were saying you could make the savings. That was where you could make the difference. A budget that would create jobs, would not hit the lower and middle income classes, and wouldn't hit the vulnerable and the less well off, and the disabled and the older people. So what do we get in the budget? You know yourselves. The social welfare bill is being discussed tonight and tomorrow night in the Dáil. We had a big meeting last Thursday because what we wanted to do was put forward a motion in the Dáil this week, a private member's motion, reversing the cuts to child benefit or reversing the respite grant. And each of those proposals was put forward, but they were ruled out of order because they had fiscal implications. Of course they had fiscal implications because you're going to change the way that the budget would work. So basically on a technicality they said, sorry, we can't debate that. So therefore the only option left open to us was to put a motion of no confidence in the government so that those issues could be brought in as to why we have no confidence in the government. So if you're wondering how come we're not focusing on those this week, that's the reason. But we are focusing on them when each of those bills is coming through. So I think the cuts that have been brought forward are extremely cynical, a lot of them, and you're aware of them yourselves. The cut to the child welfare is particularly cynical. The putting income tax on maternity benefit, the cutback in the carers' respite is extremely unfair on those people who are already giving a service which is saving the state money, most of them to the detriment of their own health. And I just think it's an awful cut that's been brought in there. It was the one thing that people were using to try and ease the burden of being a carer full-time 24/7 in some way. I know some people were using it maybe to buy extra medicines or to pay the tax on car or whatever else they might have as expenses in their own home. And I think it's an awful, it's a disgraceful cut.